Hi everyone! Today I want to talk to you a little bit more about Chapter 22, Descent with Modification, our Darwinian view of life. Now, Charles Darwin really ushered in this whole era of evolutionary biology. And it's really hard now to think about how revolutionary this was, but at the time, the ideas were so different about how organisms came to be on our planet. And so Darwin wrote a lot about and eventually was credited for this idea of descent with modification, that organisms seen today come from and are modifications of the ancestral condition. So prior to Darwin, or at the time, people were thinking about organisms as being placed and being made how they are in the current state. So species were made just how they are, species didn't change, organisms didn't change. So this idea was really revolutionary, that organisms came from other organisms and that species change over time into other species. And we can see this now because we can see that, yes, in fact, organisms are modified versions of their ancestors. And this started to explain some of the variation that had previously been ignored. So prior to Darwin, people were thinking about variation as just something that's there and just ignoring the fact that we see lots of variation within and between organisms. And so this was really the key to the evolutionary process that we know about today. What's interesting is that even though Charles Darwin is recognized as sort of the ushering in this era of evolutionary biology, his book on the origin of species by means of natural selection never included the word evolution. So his whole book lays out natural selection, lays out all the evidence for it, never mentions evolution because that would be such a major departure from what people thought at the time. And so what gave us a lot of the evidence for this theory of evolution and natural selection is the fossil record. So ideas about how things changed over time are also changing over time. So fossils are remains or traces of organisms from the past. So they may be the actual organism or just an imprint of that organism. And they're usually found in sedimentary rock, which appear in what's called strata, or these layers of rock. And so as rock is formed, things die and fossils form in that rock, and then more layers are put on top. So the newest stuff's on top, which means the newest fossils are on top. The older things are deeper, older fossils are deeper. And this can be seen all over the world. So we've got some nice examples here in San Francisco, which is that picture seen by the bottom of the screen that's showing the layered rock we get around San Francisco Bay. And Darwin used a lot of the fossil record for his theory of evolution, his theory of natural selection. But the study of fossils, paleontology, was developed by this French scientist, Georges Cuvier. And so he hypothesized that the boundaries between strata, the boundaries between the layers of rock, represent catastrophic events because we see different types of organisms preserved in the different layers of rock. And at this time, when Georges Cuvier was working on his work, people didn't think that species could go extinct. They thought that species were always going to be preserved in their current form as living organisms. But as Cuvier was working on these larger animals like elephants and rhinoceros, he was thinking about, okay, these fossil elephants we're seeing are not found in their form in the world currently. So where did they go? So he had this, was a big proponent of extinction early on. And now we know that many species on Earth have gone extinct, right? We don't have dinosaurs anymore. We don't have a lot of these things that we had thousands and thousands of years ago. So he published extensively on the study of vertebrate fossils. So Darwin, using his work, built on the fossil record, and studied fossils all around the world. So very famously, Charles Darwin went on this voyage of the Beagle, so the Beagle being the ship that sailed from England all the way around the world. And as Darwin was observing the fossils around the world, he found that fossils resembled living species from that same region. So if you find elephants in Africa, you find fossilized things that look similar to elephants also in Africa. And he noticed that living species resembled other species from nearby regions. So you didn't find elephants in Africa and elephant fossils in South America. You found elephant fossils and elephants in Africa. And nearby, you might see similar species, similar organisms. And this led Darwin to focus on adaptation. So slow change in organisms over time. And as Darwin was developing his manuscript and developing his ideas, he received a manuscript from Alfred Russel Wallace, who around the same time had developed a very similar theory. So they were converging on this idea of natural selection, which is the process in which individuals with favorable heritable traits are more likely to survive and reproduce. So the organisms that are best suited for the environment, have favorable traits, are going to live and are going to have babies and then pass those traits on to their babies. And so natural selection, which we'll talk about extensively next time, is this process by which evolution occurs. It's not the only process. Evolution can happen in other ways as well, but it is the primary process by which evolution can occur. All right, I'll see you next time.